Listen, we've seen some dumb villains on this channel, but Sebastian just won the gold medal for sheer, unadulterated stupidity. Pause effect. Imagine stealing $3 million from the Mafia, framing your ex for it, and showing up to a black market auction thinking you're a genius. But wait, plot twist. Who is standing there holding hands with the Don of the Falcone family? Yep, your ex rocking a massive Cartier diamond. But guys, Hainer was six. Here's the most heartbreaking irony. Celeste cleared her name. She had a first-class ticket and total freedom, but she looked at the monster who destroys lives for a living and realized she'd rather be a captive in his dark world than a victim in the light. They both lost their normal lives, but they found each other.
Subject Celeste exhibits an acute panic response, evidenced by neuromuscular tension in her grip. The visual trigger for this distress is her former partner, the architect of her psychological trauma. Her immediate compulsion is for avoidance. In a state of dissociation, she makes an impulsive plea to an unknown male figure. "Dance with me. My ex is here," perceiving him solely as a tool for escape, oblivious to his true identity. The environment, a high society gala, serves as a stressor for the subject. Celeste Adams, an appraiser whose profession necessitates interaction with the affluent. Her anxiety intensifies upon identifying Sebastian Hayes, his proprietary posture with Victoria Street. James confirms his status as a megalomaniac narcissist who discarded Celeste 3 months prior, deeming her insufficient for his grandiosity. The subject's respiration becomes restricted. She observes Sebastian Hayes surveying the room, displaying a smirk indicative of narcissistic satisfaction. He is actively seeking his former target to assert his dominance. Attempting to withdraw, she makes physical contact with an immovable male presence. A stabilizing touch prevents a loss of composure. Careful! A low-frequency vocalization registers, simultaneously placid and menacing. The subject turns, her apology silenced by direct eye contact. The individual is a study in controlled lethality, standing approximately 6'3" with a physique that occludes her view. His features are angular, almost sculpted, with storm gray eyes that suggest deep clinical observation. A scar bisecting his left eyebrow serves as the only discordant feature. I am so terribly sorry," Celeste vocalizes, her cardiac rhythm accelerating. Before a response is offered, she reacquires her primary visual stressor. Sebastian's narcissistic smirk intensifies as he and his companion begin their approach. Primal fear overwhelms Celeste's rational thought processes. The prospect of their condescension is intolerable. Acting on pure survival instinct, she reduces the proximity to the stranger, noting a scent of cologne and ozone. "Please dance with me," she articulates, her voice a tremor. "My ex is watching us." A flicker of surprise crosses his features, replaced by a slow, predatory smile. This smile, a clear display of dominance, should have triggered a flight response. "Is that so?" he vocalizes, the resonance felt in his chest. "Please," she reiterates, her hand making contact with his lapel. "Just one dance." The man signals a server, disposes of his drink, and encircles her waist. The latent power in his grip induces a physiological shock. He pulls her into full body contact, initiating movement as the music shifts. "Follow me," he commands. Celeste's compliance is autonomic. He does not merely dance, he dominates the space, creating a perimeter that other subjects instinctively avoid. "You're trembling," he observes, the pressure of his hand on her exposed back serving as a point of somatic focus. "I'm terrified," Celeste admits, her psychological defenses depleted. "He deconstructed my life and now requires an audience for his triumph." The man's gaze fixes past her, his expression hardening as he evaluates the approaching male. "The blonde man in the substandard suit?" A hysterical laugh escapes her. "It's Tom Ford." But yes, he presents as a coward, the man assesses, and made a poor exchange. Celeste processes the unexpected clinical validation. Who are you? A convenient solution, he states, executing a low dip as Sebastian and Victoria arrive. Celeste. Sebastian's vocalization is amplified, designed to attract attention. I anticipated your presence. The stranger returns her to an upright position, using his body as a physical barrier. The ambient temperature seems to decrease under his focused stare. Sebastian's projection of superiority wavers. Victoria instinctively retreats. Sebastian, Celeste responds, her voice exhibiting low amplitude. I see you've acquired a new partner, Sebastian retorts, attempting to reassert control by scrutinizing the stranger. I don't believe we've been introduced. Sebastian Hayes of Hayes Capital. He extends a hand. The stranger's gaze assesses the gesture as contemptible. The lady is otherwise engaged, he states, his quiet tone conveying absolute authority. The statement functions not as a fact, but as a verdict. Sebastian withdraws his hand. Pardon me, I was addressing my ex. That interaction has concluded, the stranger counters, his focus unbroken. Depart, Mr. Hayes, while ambulatory function remains. The threat's potency lies in its detached clinical delivery. Sebastian's bravado disintegrates. He gives Celeste a look of emergent fear before making a rapid withdrawal with Victoria. Celeste remains stunned. What was that? The stranger's predatory smile reappears. Upon releasing her, the psychosomatic sensation of his touch lingers. I was offering assistance, Celeste. He has knowledge of her name without it being provided. He removes a stray hair from her face. Enjoy your evening. Do not expend emotional energy on a non-entity. With this cryptic parting, he recedes into the crowd, leaving Celeste in a state of profound dysregulation. Monday morning begins with a pervasive sense of anxiety as Celeste sits before her gemological tools. Sleep has been unattainable since the event, her mind replaying the tactile and visual data of the encounter. A dominant hand, storm gray eyes assessing her as prey. You appear to have lost a conflict with an apparition, Adams. Her colleague Sarah deposits a file. Merely fatigued, Celeste prevaricates. Long night? Indeed, Sarah smirks. The prevailing rumor is your interaction with the city's primary bogeyman. Celeste frowns. What are you talking about? He was just some man. Sarah exhibits clinical shock. Celeste, do not tell me you are that unaware you have no data on his identity. No. Who was he? Before Sarah can respond, the gallery doors open with significant force, disrupting the quiet professional milieu. Through her office window, Celeste observes 4 men in dark suits. Their coordinated movements and methodical scanning identify them not as security, but as a tactical unit. Arthur Caldwell, her superior, emerges from his office in a visible state of agitation. Then, the instigator of the gala encounter appears in the doorway, causing Celeste's respiration to cease. The office lighting accentuates his formidable presence. He is attired in a 3-piece suit that signals immense power. He moves with calm, deliberate purpose, ignoring the palpable fear radiating from Arthur Caldwell. Who is that? Celeste whispers. Sarah's fingernails press into her arm. That, she hisses, her voice trembling, is DeAndre Falcone. He controls the Falcone criminal organization. His assets include the port and the city's illegal gaming operations. He is the most dominant and feared individual in New York, Celeste. He is the syndicate. The oxygen in the room feels depleted. DeAndre Falcone. The name is a local legend associated with extreme threat. She realizes she used this apex predator as a shield against a former partner. Oh, God, Celeste whispers, recalling his words to Sebastian. Walk away while you still have the legs to do so. The statement was not a threat. It was a clinical prognosis. Miss Adams! Celeste startles. Arthur Caldwell stands at her door, his face displaying signs of extreme duress. One of DeAndre's men is positioned beside him. Yes, Mr. Caldwell, Celeste replies, rising on unstable legs. Mr. Falcone is in the private viewing room, Caldwell reports, his voice strained. He has a new acquisition and requires an immediate appraisal of its art. He specifically requested you. Me? Celeste's voice is barely audible. I am a junior appraiser. You manage such accounts. I attempted to clarify that, Caldwell rasps, wiping perspiration from his brow. Caldwell was insistent, stating Falcone admired the subjects. Audacity at a prior event. My pleas were noted. Rejecting this man was not an option. The procession through the opulent corridor toward the suite mirrored a final approach to an execution. Caldwell opened the heavy door but recoiled, refusing to cross the threshold. DeAndre Falcone was observing the Manhattan skyline from a panoramic window. He was holding a scotch at 10 in the morning and did not acknowledge her entrance. Secure the door, Celeste, he instructed. The sound of his voice triggered a known, visceral fear response in the subject. She complied. The lock's click resonated with the finality of a sealed crypt. She remained frozen in the room's center, her tablet held like a flimsy defense. DeAndre finally turned. A ghost of a smile touched his lips as his intense gaze met hers. You possessed no awareness of my identity that evening, he stated. A flat declaration, not a question. No, Mr. Falcone, I was not aware. Celeste raised her chin, an overt display of fabricated courage concealing her physiological tremor. Had I known, I would not have dared. To place your hands on my person? He interjected, taking a single deliberate step forward. To appoint me as your impromptu bodyguard. To leverage my presence to humiliate your pathetic former partner. A dark flush of adrenaline bloomed on Celeste's neck. I apologize profoundly. My behavior was inexcusable. DeAndre halted, his proximity now a breath away from hers. That potent, dark scent of wood and authority overwhelmed her senses once more. Cease your apology. It was the most stimulating 5 minutes I have experienced at such gatherings in a decade. You exhibit a specific lack of fear, Celeste. I find this trait compelling. He moved toward a leather armchair, gesturing for her to occupy its mate. I was direct with your superior. I have acquired a property in the Hamptons. Its previous owner amassed a significant collection of European art. I require an expert to separate the masterworks from the refuse that will be incinerated. Incinerated? Celeste repeated, the word causing her own respiration to falter. If it is inauthentic, it is consigned to the fire, DeAndre affirmed, lifting a glass to his lips with absolute conviction. I tolerate 0 forgeries in my world, Celeste, not in art and not in my associates. You are to be at the estate tomorrow. You will function as my exclusive consultant until the project is complete. Mr. Falcone, Celeste began, articulating each word as if navigating a minefield. My professional obligations are extensive. I cannot simply forsake my other clients. DeAndre's eyes hardened, an almost imperceptible shift. In that instant, the room's ambient temperature seemed to plummet. Henceforth, you have a singular client. You solicited my help on Saturday. I provided it. In my sphere, favors are binding agreements and all debts are eventually called due. He rose, signaling the meeting's end. He passed her, but paused at the door, his lips close to her ear. "Pack for a 7-day period," he murmured. "My chauffeur will arrive at 8. The immense iron gates of the Falcone property retracted like the mandibles of a mechanical beast. The estate encompassed a wooded private promontory in East Hampton, fortified by 10-foot stone barriers monitored by surveillance equipment. As the black Escalade advanced, Celeste gripped her handbag, her cardiac rhythm a frantic, uncontrolled beat. Her night was dedicated to researching DeAndre Falcone. The data was sparse, obscured by a plethora of speculation and dismissed legal charges. Allegations included extortion, racketeering, financial cleansing, and suggestions that his rivals tended to disappear. The individual she had so carelessly engaged with was the shadow sovereign of the city's criminal hierarchy. The driver, a large man identified as Rocco, opened her door. As Celeste's feet touched the gravel path, her focus was fixed on the sprawling, Gothic-style mansion. "Miss Adams," a crisp voice pierced the quiet. A severe-looking woman in a severe black uniform descended the stone stairs. "I am Mrs. Gable, the estate manager. Mr. Falcone is occupied in the East Wing. I am instructed to escort you to the library where the art is being held." Celeste could only manage a silent nod, trailing the woman through vast, quiet corridors of marble and dark timber. The property's profound silence was disquieting, feeling less like a residence and more like a perfectly preserved burial chamber. The library was a stunning chamber, a 2-story repository for books that smelled of aged paper and leather, with enormous bay windows that framed a view of the agitated ocean. Canvases were positioned everywhere, set on easels or leaning against the towering bookshelves. For the subsequent 4 hours, she submerged herself in the work, employing the task as a psychological buffer against the escalating terror of her situation. She moved from one piece to the next, authenticating a brilliant Modigliani, a questionable Rembrandt, and a skillfully forged Vermeer. She was analyzing the chiaroscuro of a Caravaggio when the library doors were thrust open violently. Celeste startled, her magnifying lens almost falling from her grasp. 2 of DeAndre's subordinates were forcibly moving a third individual between them. Their prisoner was struggling, his attire was ripped, and his face was marred by a bleeding gash over his eye. They deposited him unceremoniously on Persian carpet. DeAndre materialized shortly after. His suit coat was gone. His white dress shirt was unbuttoned at the neck, the sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing muscular forearms covered in complex, dark tattoos. He was the personification of death. He was the predator from the reports. DeAndre's focus was absolute, seemingly oblivious to Celeste, who had retreated into the shadows behind a large terrestrial globe. "Falcone, please, I assure you," the man on the floor whimpered, his voice fracturing from abject fear. Celeste pressed a hand to her own mouth, stifling a scream. She recognized him. It was Sebastian. Her former lover was kneeling in a crime lord's study, weeping, his high-end shirt stained with his own blood. DeAndre advanced on him, his expression a blank slate, devoid of anger or any discernible emotion. He produced a silver lighter, flicking it open and closed, the sound creating a sharp, metallic cadence. "You are indebted to me for $3 million, Sebastian. DeAndre said, his tone a low, almost mild rumble. The calmness was so profound it was more frightening than any shout. Funds my organization invested with Hayes Capital for reallocation. My ledgers indicate you have been wiring it to offshore destinations for a new vessel and a jewel for your latest romantic interest. All color drained from Celeste's face. Sebastian had embezzled from the mob. He had defrauded DeAndre Falcone to finance his new life with Victoria. I can recover it, Sebastian begged, shuffling backward until he collided with a heavy leather armchair. I require additional time. The market changed. My assets are not liquid. The assault was instantaneous, a predator's lunge. DeAndre's arm extended, his hand seizing Sebastian's throat and slamming his head against the chair's back. The lighter ceased its clicking. Do not challenge my intellect with such transparent fabrications, DeAndre hissed, the refined veneer dissolving to reveal the brute beneath the expensive clothing. I am aware of the precise location of every single dollar. You acquired a new vehicle with my capital. You constructed a life you did not earn. DeAndre, I'm imploring you. Sebastian gasped, his complexion darkening to a deep purple as the pressure increased. I will do anything. I can repay it through service. You could not settle a $3 million liability in 10 lifetimes, you worthless parasite, DeAndre snarled. He leaned closer, his voice a venomous whisper. And the exquisite irony? You discarded a woman of genuine substance because you judged her origins to be inferior, only to steal from a monster to masquerade as a man of status. Celeste's perception of reality ceased. He was referring to her. He was informed. He knew everything. He had likely possessed a complete file on her before she had ever learned his name. With an expression of utter contempt, DeAndre released Sebastian, who collapsed to the floor, gasping for air. DeAndre took a crisp, white handkerchief from his pocket and cleaned his hands with cold, systematic care. Relocate him to the quiet room in the cellar, DeAndre commanded, his gaze averted from the defeated man. Allow him to contemplate his liability in isolation. If he fails to produce a viable repayment strategy by midnight, you may begin removing his fingers. Understood, boss. They pulled Sebastian upright, his frantic supplications echoing down the hall before being absorbed by the structure. And then once more the library fell into complete silence. For a protracted moment, DeAndre remained motionless, his attention fixed on the empty portal. Then, with his back still toward her, his voice cut through the stillness. You may emerge now, Celeste. Celeste's body became rigid, the oxygen held captive in her lungs. She stepped out from the shadows, her tablet trembling in her grasp. DeAndre finally turned to look at her. The predator from moments before had vanished, replaced by the detached, unreadable man she initially met. I must apologize for the disturbance, he stated, his voice as smooth as bourbon while he poured a measure from a glass decanter. I was not aware Mrs. Gable had installed you here. You intend to harm him, she whispered, her voice thin and insubstantial. Her disdain for Sebastian was insignificant compared to the primal violence she had just observed. DeAndre drank slowly, his gray eyes holding her captive. I am merely settling a debt, just as I settled the one between us. Are you going to terminate his life? He placed his glass down. With several measured steps, he eliminated the space between them, invading her personal field. The warmth from his body was a tangible force. He lifted a hand, his knuckles lightly brushing against her chilled cheek. She flinched but did not move away. "That, my dear, is a matter for you to decide," he murmured, his thumb tracing the sharp contour of her jaw. "What valuation would you assign to your former partner's inconsequential existence?" The large library was silent, except for the sound of the Atlantic breaking against the shore far below. Subject Celeste was fixated by DeAndre Falcone's predatory gaze, her psyche reeling from his audacious proposal. "Name a price for the negligible life of your former lover." "I—" Her vocalization ceased. Celeste swallowed, fighting the impulse to recoil from the hand still branding her cheek. "I lack $3 million, Mr. Falcone." A cold, deep laugh vibrated in his chest as he withdrew his hand, his penetrating stare unwavering. "I am fully cognizant of your fiscal state. Celeste, your position at Caldwell and Finch is lucrative, but insufficient for Sebastian's apartment. Your currency holds no value for me. What is your objective, then?" she countered, a spark of defiance resurfacing. "Why demand I quantify his worth? I despise him. He degraded me, but I do not wish him dead." DeAndre returned to the decanter, pouring the amber fluid which captured the fading sunlight. "Because, my dear, Sebastian Hayes committed a terminal error. Theft was merely his initial transgression. He intended to launder the funds with forged art documents which were to be concealed in the Caldwell and Finch archives." The blood in Celeste's veins felt like ice. "What?" "He planned to exploit your credentials," DeAndre stated clinically, leaning on his massive desk. "He installed a keylogger on your system 2 months prior to his desertion." The betrayal's design was elegantly simple. Leverage her access to validate counterfeit art, funnel the proceeds through a shell corporation, and settle his debt to me. Should authorities uncover the fraud, all evidence would implicate Celeste Adams, the resentful, overlooked appraiser. The room seemed to tilt, and Celeste grasped a bookshelf for support. This was beyond heartbreak. This was the framework of her complete destruction. Sebastian had constructed a prison for her, prepared to see her decay to preserve himself. "That is false," she whispered, yet a cold certainty formed in her gut, recognizing Sebastian's characteristic cowardice in the plan. DeAndre slid a silver data stick over the desk. "This contains the forensic analysis from his encrypted drives. You may observe for yourself. His affection was a performance, Celeste. You were a tool for his objective. The ideal scapegoat." Hot tears welled in her eyes, but she forbade their release. Her gaze locked on the drive as fear transmuted into a frigid, sharp rage. "Why are you presenting this to me?" Celeste asked, her focus snapping back to the crime boss. "You could eliminate him with this evidence. Why involve me whatsoever?" DeAndre pushed away from the desk, his advance deliberate and predatory. "Because his scheme involved a competitor of mine, Lorenzo Rossi, the supplier of the forgeries Sebastian intended to use. In 3 days, Rossi will host a private auction at his Newport estate, a facade for his enterprise to liquidate illicit assets." DeAndre halted a foot from her, his cologne an invasive presence. "I require a specialist, an eye that can distinguish a fake from 50 paces, a reputation unsullied in the legitimate art market, and critically, an individual with a personal investment in witnessing Sebastian Hayes' utter ruination." Celeste looked up at his sculpted features. "You are proposing employment?" I am proposing the role of my fiancé, DeAndre amended, his voice lowering to a conspiratorial murmur. Rossi is aware I have no interest in art. My solitary attendance would provoke suspicion. But if I appear with a respected appraiser, a woman with whom I am supposedly besotted, he will perceive only a man attempting to purchase her favor. And if I decline? Celeste questioned, her heart hammering her ribs. DeAndre's face became granite, the predator beneath the veneer baring its fangs. Then Sebastian's narrative concludes at the bottom of the sea. Rossi's auction will proceed successfully, and the authorities will discover the fraudulent appraisals Sebastian concealed the Caldwell servers. They will find you guilty, Celeste. He delivered it not as a threat, but as an inescapable fact. The room had become a trap. If I consent, Celeste began, her voice trembling, and assist your plot against Rossi, what is Sebastian's fate? He continues to live, DeAndre stated, his tone flat and devoid of emotion. I will seize all his assets, demolish his reputation, and guarantee his permanent exile. But his life will be spared. Her eyes shifted from the data stick to the lethal man before her. A quiet academic from Connecticut, now bargaining with the devil for a man's life. Agreed, Celeste declared. I will be your fiancé. A slow, victorious smile stretched across DeAndre's face. He moved closer, tilting her chin to compel her gaze to meet his. Excellent, he murmured. Welcome to the family, Mia Cara. The subsequent 48 hours were a vertiginous haze of opulent threat. Celeste was assigned the primary guest suite in the Falcone estate, a space that dwarfed her own apartment, complete with a marble hearth and a balcony viewing a private shore. The luxury, however, was negated by 2 armed sentinels posted at her door. She was both guest and captive. On Tuesday, a squad of stylists arrived. Mr. Falcone's requirements are exact, a woman named Madame Celine declared, presenting a stunning, backless Oscar de la Renta dress in midnight blue. Your presentation must signal immense wealth, inaccessibility, and your absolute belonging to him. Positioned on a dais, Celeste was adorned with silks and gems. A jeweler from Cartier, with his own security detail, unlatched a steel case, showing a breathtaking sapphire and diamond necklace. The Rossi event demands a display of supreme power, the severe housekeeper, Mrs. Gable, stated. You will wear this for the entire evening. It symbolizes DeAndre's possession of you. Celeste observed her reflection, seeing a stranger. Her auburn hair was styled in a stern, sophisticated manner. Her makeup was perfect, accentuating her features and igniting a dangerous glint in her green eyes. She looked precisely like a syndicate wife. That evening, DeAndre summoned her for dinner. They convened in a grand hall, illuminated by a massive crystal chandelier. DeAndre sat at the head of a long table, the cuffs of his black shirt rolled up, showing a silver Patek Philippe. When Celeste appeared in a simple black dress, his talk with his massive bodyguard Rocco abruptly ceased. DeAndre's gaze consumed her, a flicker of raw possession on his face, before his controlled facade returned. He rose, pulling out the chair to his right. You appear magnificent, he said quietly as she took her seat. I am the lure, Celeste responded, her tone like ice as she arranged her napkin. A soft chuckle from DeAndre resonated in the vast room as he resumed his seat. Rossi is a viper, but he honors the old traditions. A made man's partner is sacrosanct. With me, you are the most secure person in Rhode Island. The meal was an exercise in restrained turmoil. They dined in a silence thick with unspoken thoughts. She found herself studying him. For a man of such notorious cruelty, his movements possessed a subtle grace, and he showed his staff a deference that conflicted with his violent renown. "You are dissecting me," DeAndre observed, swirling the wine in his goblet. "I am attempting to comprehend you," Celeste conceded, assuming he would value directness. "You are a violent felon, yet you are the sole barrier between me and a federal penitentiary." "I am safeguarding an asset," DeAndre corrected her fluidly. "Your liberty is simply a convenient outcome." "It is more than that." He paused mid-gesture. He genuinely looked at her then, and for a fleeting moment, the iron facade of his control seemed to fissure. "It is unwise to trust monsters, Celeste, but it is fatal to search for their soul. Do not mistake my role for that of a hero." Before she could reply, a quiet chime sounded. Rocco passed a satellite phone to DeAndre, whose expression grew stern as he listened. He terminated the call and slid the device toward her. "This is for you," he stated, his voice impassive. Celeste took the phone, bewildered. "Hello?" "Celeste, oh dear God, I need your help." An utter chill enveloped Celeste. The voice, fractured and weeping, belonged to Victoria St. James. "Victoria?" Celeste said, her eyes flashing to DeAndre. He merely observed her, slowly rotating his wine glass. "He has ruined me, Celeste." Victoria wept through the static. "So Sebastian liquidated my family's trust. He faked my father's signature for a wire transfer. The feds searched our house this morning. We have nothing left." A dreadful lucidity washed over Celeste. Sebastian had not merely used Victoria. He had plundered her family's entire estate to cover his underworld debts. "Victoria, I am not sure how I can assist," Celeste said, the irony of the situation biting her. The other woman was now pleading with her. "He mentioned your files," Victoria sobbed. "He was inebriated and boasted that if he fell, he'd drag you down with him for the art fraud. I'm under investigation because of him, and he intends to sacrifice you to the authorities. You must retrieve those papers before he can implicate me as his accomplice." "Where is he?" Celeste pressed, her hand tightening around the phone. "I have no idea. He disappeared 2 days ago. Celeste, I'm begging you." DeAndre calmly reached out, retrieved the phone from her grasp, and ended the connection. He placed it beside his plate. Celeste was paralyzed, her thoughts a chaotic storm. "You were aware," she whispered to DeAndre. "You knew he was bankrupting her." "I knew he was a cornered, desperate animal," DeAndre answered, slicing his steak with disquieting composure. Subject Sebastian Hayes displayed predatory behavior, seeking a host for parasitic gain. Victoria Street James was merely the most resource-rich target identified. Therefore, your initial response was inaction. His operations were his own until they intersected with my interests, DeAndre stated, his affect flat, his gray eyes fixed on hers. "Sebastian Hayes is the pathology within your civilized system, Celeste. A man who misappropriates with documents and is shielded by legal frameworks. They disdain individuals like me who execute our own judgments. But which is greater malignancy? The one who financially exsanguinates you, or the one who terminates the threat with a single projectile?" Celeste could formulate no response. The subject's meticulously constructed reality was now a compromised structure, decaying internally. From this psychological collapse, DeAndre Falcone had emerged, presenting a threatening but compelling form of deliverance. "Consume this, Mia Cara," DeAndre murmured, his gaze exhibiting a possessive intensity. Tomorrow we proceed to Newport. You will demonstrate to Lorenzo Rossi the new locus of your psychological orbit. The Newport manors were monuments to dynastic power, but Lorenzo Rossi's estate was less a home than a fortress sheathed in affluence. As DeAndre's armored Maybach ascended the drive, Celeste observed the colossal limestone edifice. Uniformed staff facilitated the entry of a global elite, a mix of financiers and syndicate leaders. Regulate your breathing, Celeste. DeAndre's voice was a low-frequency vibration beside her. She startled, her gaze breaking from the external scene. DeAndre observed her from across the vehicle's opulent interior. He was attired in a bespoke Tom Ford tuxedo that rendered his powerful build both elegant and threatening. In the ambient light, a silver scar bisecting his brow served as a brutal signifier, lending his handsome features a savage quality. "I am breathing," she falsified, her anxious fingers constricting on her clutch. "Your presentation suggests an encounter with an executioner, not a gallery exhibition," he observed, one corner of his mouth lifting slightly. He extended his large, warm hand, enveloping her trembling ones. "Focus on me." Celeste met his unwavering gray gaze. "Tonight, you are not Celeste Adams, the subdued academic from Caldwell and Finch's research department," DeAndre instructed, his voice a deep, anchoring force. "Tonight, you are the singular focus of DeAndre Falcone's attention. You are beyond reproach. If a man's gaze lingers, he will forfeit his eyes. If he addresses you without deference, he will forfeit his tongue. Is that understood?" This primal claim of ownership induced a strange warmth, a terrifying form of protection she intensely desired. "It is understood," she exhaled. "Good." DeAndre reached into his jacket, producing a small black velvet case. He opened it. On a silk bed lay an emerald-cut diamond of such magnitude and purity it seemed to possess an internal luminescence. "Your left hand." After a brief hesitation, Celeste presented her trembling digits. DeAndre fitted the cold, heavy platinum ring onto her finger. Its mass felt like an inescapable tether, anchoring her permanently to his high-threat environment. "It is time, Mia Cara," he murmured, pressing a slow, unexpectedly gentle kiss to her knuckles. The Maybach halted. Rocco opened her door, and DeAndre exited first, offering a hand to guide Celeste into the sharp, saline air. The instant her Oscar de la Renta gown touched the crimson carpet, a barrage of photo flashes erupted from the press corps. DeAndre showed no reaction. His hand settled with proprietary pressure on the exposed skin of her lower back, a public declaration as he led her up the grand marble stairs. The foyer was a sensory assault of cascading orchids, the resonance of crystal and the quiet thrum of significant capital being exchanged. Servers circulated with Dom Perignon, while a string quartet performed Vivaldi. Superficially, it resembled charity functions Celeste had known, yet the social atmosphere was wholly alien. The air held a predatory tension. These were not simply affluent men, they were hunters. "DeAndre, my friend." A loud salutation cut through the curated ambiance. A man in a flamboyant, silver-threaded suit approached with open arms. Lorenzo Rossi was shorter than DeAndre, with slicked-back hair and a smile that was sharp yet empty. "Lorenzo," DeAndre acknowledged, reciprocating the ritualized embrace. "An impressive event? You consistently host the premier gatherings for the East Coast's finest?" Rossi beamed, then his focus shifted to Celeste. His eyes widened, his gaze a tangible force that traveled from her shoulders to the large Cartier sapphire at her neck before locking onto her face. "And who is this magnificent specimen? You have been withholding information, DeAndre." DeAndre's hand at Celeste's waist contracted slightly, a subtle signal that caused Rossi to take a small step back. "Allow me to introduce my fiancée, Celeste Adams," DeAndre declared, his tone like velvet concealing a blade. "Celeste, this is our host, Lorenzo Rossi." "Fiancé?" Rossi echoed, his polished composure momentarily failing. He recovered, seizing Celeste's hand to press a moist kiss upon it. "An honor, Miss Adams, a distinct honor." I was not aware that Falcone Enterprise was poised for expansion. "We value our discretion," Celeste answered, her own voice adopting an aristocratic coolness that was new to her. "But DeAndre was insistent I view your collection. He spoke of your talent for singular acquisitions." Rossi's smile became strained. "I possess a certain discernment. In fact, the main gallery is accessible. I have an item tonight that will cause experts in Paris to despair. A lost Raphael sketch." Celeste felt DeAndre's thumb trace a deliberate path along her spine. This was the moment. The stratagem was in place. "A Raphael?" Celeste arched a perfect eyebrow, her tone laced with academic skepticism. "That is peculiar. Given the Uffizi fire of 1762 destroyed most of his uncatalogued works. A genuine piece surfacing now would be akin to discovering a phantom." A tick manifested in Rossi's jaw. "My authenticators are peerless, I can assure you." "We will determine that," DeAndre said quietly, steering Celeste past the clearly agitated man. "Pray, lead on, Lorenzo." They moved into a secure, climate-controlled gallery. In the center, under a single intense spotlight, rested a small, framed depiction of the Madonna and Child. A small cluster of potential buyers was present. Celeste approached the artifact, retrieving a small jeweler's loop from her clutch. The room fell into a profound silence as she leaned closer. Rossi observed from the periphery, a fresh sheen of perspiration on his brow. She examined the paper, the ink, the fundamental character of the lines. It was an expert fabrication, a masterwork of deception. But to one immersed in Renaissance art, the errors were glaring. The paper was artificially aged with tea, a novice error, and the ink lacked the iron oxidation that 5 centuries would produce. It was the very forgery Sebastian had orchestrated for her to authenticate. Celeste withdrew the loop. Her gaze connected with DeAndre's. He gave a minute, nearly imperceptible nod. "Destroy him." As Celeste prepared to dismantle Rossi's acquisition, the scene at the gallery entrance erupted. "Release me! I must see Lorenzo! Rossi, I implore you!" The crowd parted as Rossi's security team propelled a disheveled, frantic man forward. His suit was torn, his face was contused, and his appearance suggested prolonged sleep deprivation. Celeste's respiration ceased. It was Sebastian. "What is this filth?" Lorenzo Rossi bellowed, his face becoming florid as his men dragged Sebastian across the immaculate floor. "Who permitted this refuse into my residence?" "He bypassed security with the catering staff, Mr. Rossi," a guard reported, twisting Sebastian's arm. Claimed he possessed urgent intelligence regarding the offshore accounts. Sebastian was hyperventilating, his eyes scanning the room of predators and power brokers like trapped prey. The arrogant Wall Street predator who had abandoned Celeste 3 months prior was gone, replaced by a trembling, broken specimen. "Rossi, you must hear me," Sebastian pleaded, his voice fracturing. "The SEC has frozen Hayes Capital. They have seized everything. I cannot deliver the payment for the artifact." A wave of alarmed murmurs rippled through the room. In their subculture, to invoke federal agencies was to invite one's own execution. Rossi appeared capable of terminating Sebastian on the spot. "You arrogant, foolish cur," Rossi hissed, advancing on him. "You led federal agents to my home?" "I possess the authentication Sebastian cried out, his last desperate gambit for self-preservation. The documentation from Caldwell and Finch, Celeste Adams affixed her signature to them. "They are proof the Raphael is genuine. You can liquidate it, cleanse the funds, and we both evade this." Celeste stood like a silent effigy beside DeAndre. Sebastian, in his panic, had not even registered her presence. He genuinely believed his vile stratagem could succeed. He genuinely believed he had flawlessly engineered her ruin. DeAndre was motionless. He merely shifted his stance, his imposing frame becoming a living obstruction to the only path of egress. He observed Sebastian as a predator assesses compromised prey. "Miss Adams will not be authenticating any art for you, Sebastian." Celeste's voice cut through the tension as sharp as fractured glass. It was disquietingly steady, imbued with a cold authority she had not known she possessed. Sebastian's head snapped toward her, his expression of utter disbelief absolute as he finally perceived her. He processed the full tableau: the designer gown, the dazzling Cartier gems, and the significant ring on her fourth finger. His gaze then shifted to the man whose hand remained possessively at her waist. DeAndre Falcone. A visible pallor overtook Sebastian's features. His motor control failed. A full collapse was averted only by the guard's intervention. "Celeste!" Sebastian vocalized, his query a fractured display of cognitive dissonance and acute fear. "What? What is the meaning of this? With him?" "She is assessing the collection," DeAndre stated on her behalf, his voice a low, dominant frequency at the silent gallery. "Is that not accurate, my love?" DeAndre observed her, the term of endearment a stark contrast to the predatory focus fixed on Sebastian. "Yes," Celeste affirmed, redirecting her attention to Lorenzo Rossi, now exhibiting signs of diaphoresis. "Mr. Rossi, your associate claims I authenticated this piece. I assure you such an error did not transpire. If it had, it would constitute grounds for my immediate dismissal due to gross incompetence." Rossi's response was agitated. "Incompetence?" he challenged, attempting to recover his professional composure. "This canvas is a certified masterwork." "It is a certified fabrication," Celeste countered, her deliberate approach toward the painting becoming the room's focal point. The affluent observers, sensing a power dynamic shifted their focus. The Madonna's robes show a right-handed artist's brushwork. Raphael was a documented left-hander. The iron gall ink shows no corresponding paper corrosion, a chemical impossibility for a 500-year-old document. Lastly, the paper contains a synthetic agent not synthesized until 1923. She addressed the assembly with the authority of a specialist, concluding an analysis. "This is not a lost Raphael. It is a contemporary forgery, likely originating from a Tuscan workshop within the last 5 years. Its value approximates $300, driven primarily by the antique frame." A profound quiet enveloped the gallery. By deconstructing the painting's legitimacy, Celeste not only ruined Rossi's event, but also exposed him as a fraud before his criminal benefactors. Rossi's face became a mask of shock. He surveyed the onlookers, met only by the cold stares of the individuals he had attempted to deceive. "She is fabricating this!" Sebastian cried out, struggling against his handlers. "This is retaliation because I terminated our relationship." DeAndre advanced, his pace measured, yet rapidly closing the distance. The guards released Sebastian, who faltered. DeAndre seized him by his lapels, forcing him to an upright position. "She is doing this," DeAndre articulated in a low tone meant only for Sebastian and Celeste, "because her affiliation is now with the Falcone family, and the Falcone name is not to be contaminated by parasites." DeAndre forcefully pushed Sebastian away. The man collided with a marble column and collapsed to the floor in a state of hysterical distress. DeAndre turned to Rossi, methodically adjusting his cuffs. "Lorenzo, your assessment protocols appear deficient, and your partner is a charlatan who has defrauded my family of $3 million. DeAndre, I swear on my mother's life, I had no knowledge of this deception," Rossi pleaded, retreating. He claimed an inside source and guaranteed the provenance was unassailable. "You have made a severe situational miscalculation," DeAndre stated, his tone devoid of warmth. He offered Celeste his arm. "Our business is concluded. I expect my $3 million, plus a substantial penalty for this. Inconvenience, wired to my account before dawn. If the capital is not present, Lorenzo, I shall return, and my fiancé will not accompany me." The implicit threat of violence saturated the atmosphere. Celeste took DeAndre's arm, joining him. She averted her gaze from Sebastian as they passed, though his cries of anguish reverberated through the space. She maintained the imperious posture of a syndicate matriarch until the armored vehicle's doors secured them inside. Once in motion, her rigid self-control disintegrated. Celeste collapsed into the leather seat, her hands exhibiting severe tremors. She sealed her eyes shut, attempting to erase the visual memory of Sebastian's public humiliation. "Ingest this," DeAndre instructed, his tone unexpectedly gentle. She opened her eyes to see him offering a crystal tumbler of liquor from the vehicle's bar. She accepted it with trembling hands, taking a significant swallow. The alcohol's heat coursed through her, mitigating the physiological symptoms of her anxiety. "Your performance was perfect," DeAndre noted, his voice reflecting an uncharacteristic softness. His gaze was no longer that of one viewing a new asset. He was observing her with clear and profound admiration. "You neutralized Rossi's entire operation non-violently. You have psychologically dismantled Sebastian. He no longer holds any influence over you, Celeste." Celeste fixated on the large gemstone still on her finger. "Doesn't he?" she whispered. She had navigated the ordeal. Her reputation was secure. But meeting DeAndre Falcone's intense gaze, she confronted a startling new awareness. She felt no impulse to remove his ring. Sunlight permeated the master suite, illuminating a Louis Vuitton bag on Celeste's bed. On the vanity, a Cartier sapphire necklace and a massive diamond ring glittered with a cold, indifferent light. The operation was complete. Lorenzo Rossi was financially crippled. Sebastian's professional life was obliterated. Her role was fulfilled. She was cleared to return to her small Queens apartment, to her academic life. Why then? Did the prospect of departure trigger a profound sense of internal vacancy? A firm knock at the door interrupted her ideation. Mrs. Gable entered, escorted by two armed men. Mr. Falcone requests your presence for breakfast in the sunroom, the housekeeper announced, her gaze noting the packed luggage. I require a car, Celeste responded, her voice faint as she adjusted her skirt. My arrangement with Mr. Falcone concluded last night. Mrs. Gable's composed expression remained unchanged. The guards were immobile. I regret that is not a viable option, Miss Adams. Mr. Falcone's instructions were explicit. You are forbidden from leaving the estate grounds. Celeste's heart rate began to accelerate. Her fleeting sense of autonomy had just been negated. I am not a prisoner. You are his guest, the woman corrected, her courteous tone laced with a distinct subtext of coercion. A surge of intense anger finally overcame Celeste's fear. Moving past the housekeeper, she walked down the corridor, ignoring the sunroom. She opened the heavy doors to DeAndre's office without announcement. He sat behind a large walnut desk, reviewing financial documents. He registered her agitated state with a frustrating calm and dismissed his personnel with a wave. The doors latched shut, isolating them. You misrepresented the term, Celeste accused, placing her hands on his desk and leaning forward. You promised my freedom. DeAndre leaned back in his chair, his gray eyes unreadable. I promised your freedom from federal indictment. There is a significant distinction. I am returning home, DeAndre. You no longer have a home to which you can return, he stated definitively. Celeste became motionless. What are you referring to? DeAndre navigated around the desk, eliminating the space between them. His characteristic scent of oud and dominance filled the room. A cornered subject will always act irrationally, he observed. After we departed Rossi's, Sebastian contacted the FBI. He offered them Rossi and the forged Caldwell and Finch paperwork in exchange for total immunity. By 6A, federal agents were serving a warrant at your auction house. All color left her face. But Arthur Caldwell can verify my innocence. DeAndre simply slid a contract across the desk. Mr. Caldwell is no longer the principal. I acquired the company at 4 this morning. My technical team purged all files related to Sebastian's forgeries before the raid. Their agents discovered no data linking you to illicit art. Your record is clean. Celeste's cognitive functions were overwhelmed as she processed the information. He had purchased and restructured an entire corporation overnight to eliminate her digital footprint. Why? She asked, her voice soft and her vision obscured by tears. You had already won. You recovered your money. Why engage in such elaborate measures for me? At that moment, the crime lord's controlled exterior fractured, exposing the primal, possessive predator beneath. DeAndre pulled her forcefully by the hips, securing her against his body. Because my ring was on your finger, he growled, his voice a dark vibration. Because you faced a room of killers and subjugated them with your intellect. Because you are my assets, Celeste, and I secure my assets, she retorted. I am not your property, even as her hands reflexively grasped his shoulders. You are, he murmured, his lips nearly touching hers. That simple life you possessed, it is gone. I personally incinerated it to ensure you avoided a federal prison. The only sanctuary available to you now is here, with me. Celeste's breathing faltered. Every rational instinct urged her to escape this dangerous, controlling individual. But in his intense gaze, she did not perceive a monster. She perceived the only person who had ever accurately assessed her. With a quiet gasp of capitulation, Celeste initiated contact between their lips. DeAndre emitted a deep, possessive sound, lifting her into him as he took her mouth. The kiss was a volatile fusion of anxiety and compulsion, a chemical reaction that obliterated all conscious thought. He pressed her against the desk, his fingers enmeshed in her hair, erasing the FBI, Sebastian, and her own identity. When he broke contact, both were gasping for air. His forehead rested against hers, his gaze a storm of fierce possession. "You are not leaving," he declared, the directive underscored by a raw, urgent need. Celeste observed the man who had dismantled her reality only to reconstruct it around himself. "That was never my decision, was it?" A slow, predatory smile formed on his lips. "No, my love, it never was." The subject's shift from a subordinate role to one of power is a rapid, disorienting event. Over the next month, Celeste's reality is restructured. She relocates from her modest office to a secure command center in Manhattan's Falcone Tower as the new acquisitions director. She manages priceless artifacts by day and is indoctrinated into the world of DeAndre Falcone by night. This is a classic presentation of Stockholm Syndrome, where the captive embraces the captor's ideology, exhibiting a shocking aptitude for her new role in criminal hierarchy. The subject's successful neutralization of Lorenzo Rossi, accomplished without physical weaponry, became a key component of her developing mythos. Her social authority had transitioned from a derived status linked to DeAndre to an intrinsic one. On a Tuesday in late November, the final psychic remnant of her former self was effectively excised. The subject was observed in a state of repose on the penthouse sofa, consuming a Bordeaux and perusing a Sotheby's catalog. The arrival of DeAndre was announced by the elevator. His presentation showed signs of fatigue, though his inherent threat persona remained intact as he removed his coat. He performed a brief intimacy ritual, a kiss to her temple, before placing a significant manila envelope on the table. "The matter is concluded," DeAndre stated, proceeding to the bar for a drink. The subject ceased her activity, her attention fixated on the envelope, which represented a known outcome. The legal proceedings involving Sebastian Hayes had resolved via a plea agreement. His admission of guilt on 3 counts of wire fraud and 2 of embezzlement resulted in a 15-year sentence at Allenwood Federal. The penalty was commensurate with the subject's perceived scale of transgression. A significant somatic release, a deep exhalation was observed in Celeste before she verbally addressed the final outstanding variable. "And Rossi?" "Rossi experienced a fatal cardiac event on his yacht 3 weeks prior," DeAndre reported, his vocal tone devoid of affect. Eye contact was established. "A significant loss to the sailing community." The subject correctly interpreted the subtext of the statement. Within this new social framework, the operational realities of control were communicated implicitly. DeAndre resumed his position beside her, his hand covering hers over the prominent Cartier diamond. "Sebastian is incarcerated. Rossi is neutralized. The federal probe into Caldwell and Finch is closed." "So," DeAndre initiated tactile contact, stroking her knuckles, "all external threats have been eliminated, Celeste." The subject's cardiac rate visibly increased. "Then what is the purpose of this?" He presented a leather passport case beside the envelope. "It contains unrestricted travel, a new identity, and access to an untraceable account with a balance of $10 million, DeAndre explained, his tone softening. His typical possessiveness was supplanted by a display of uncharacteristic vulnerability. "Your entry into this world was orchestrated by another man." My objective was your safety, and it is achieved. You now possess total autonomy, Celeste. You may depart without consequence. The subject focused the passport, an object previously associated with a desired escape. This object symbolized a normative existence. Her attention shifted from the case to DeAndre. He displayed significant somatic tension, anticipating her response. The dominant male, in this moment, subjected himself to her evaluation. This is an exit strategy. She verbalized quietly. This is an option, he countered, reframing the dynamic. Be clear on this point, he continued, his tone a binding oath. Should you remain, exit is impossible. You become my possession until my death. You will assume my identity, my conflicts, and my pathology. The subject observed the ring, the tangible signifier of her attachment. She conducted a mental risk assessment, a life of normative solitude versus the captor, a threat to society, but her personal bastion of security. He had not merely destroyed her confinement, he had repurposed its components into a seat of power. In a decisive gesture, Celeste bypassed the passport and its offer of sterile freedom. She consumed her wine, then initiated physical contact, kissing a scar on his jaw. DeAndre, she stated, rescind the travel arrangements. The public terminals are unpleasantly congested, she murmured near his jaw. A guttural, involuntary vocalization emanated from DeAndre. He displaced the coffee table and aggressively repositioned her onto his lap. The passport fell to the floor, an artifact of a rejected timeline. His subsequent kiss was not an inquiry, but a reassertion of ownership, a dominant figure securing his asset. The subject's prior identity, Celeste Adams, was extinguished, supplanted by a persona that perceived the pathological environment as desirable. Later, the subject is observed on a balcony at the Falcone estate, surveying the boundaries of her opulent and hazardous new territory. The subject registered the tactile sensation of the diamond, its refracted light contrasting with the turbulent sea. Her original submissive personality construct had been purged through a series of traumatic events, resulting in the emergence of a highly dominant persona. Her internal narrative was not one of survival, but of mastery over the primary aggressor. When DeAndre initiated physical contact from behind, she displayed zero resistance, assimilating into his hold. The syndicate, a source of objective threat, was now perceived the subject as her own sphere of influence. Her previous fear-based responses to this environment were fully extinguished.